Banks across the United Kingdom are under mounting scrutiny and facing a wave of outrage after reports surfaced suggesting that they may soon introduce strict withdrawal limits aimed specifically at people over the age of 65, a development that has triggered widespread alarm among pensioners up and down the country, because the mere thought of older citizens being told they cannot freely access their own money in the way they have always done feels not only unsettling but deeply unfair. And many are calling the proposal outrageous, frightening, and fundamentally wrong, since cash is not simply a matter of convenience for this generation but a vital tool for survival, security, and independence, and when people who have worked hard all their lives, saved carefully, and contributed to the system for decades suddenly hear that their ability to use and withdraw their own savings might be capped or controlled, it feels like a direct assault on their dignity and freedom, which is why this debate has exploded into national attention and why questions are now being asked about whether the banks are truly motivated by a desire to protect vulnerable customers from fraud or whether this move is instead part of a broader, more deliberate push toward quietly phasing out cash altogether in favor of a digital-only society, something that critics argue would leave countless people behind. Banks, of course, insist that their goal is to protect pensioners from scams and con artists, framing withdrawal limits as a safety measure, but many experts and community voices say that this is not protection at all, because while fraud is a real concern, restricting cash does not actually stop criminals from exploiting the elderly, and instead what it does is strip older people of the independence they have always known. Because for many over 65 cash is not just a preference but an absolute necessity, the foundation upon which they budget, shop, and live their daily lives, whether that means paying in the local corner shop, setting aside notes for weekly expenses, or feeling reassured when a card machine breaks down or when online banking services crash, and to take that away, far from protecting them, leaves them vulnerable in new and damaging ways that the banks seem unwilling to acknowledge. The context of this development makes it even more troubling, as it comes at a time when bank branches are closing at record speed, cash machines are disappearing from high streets, and contactless and online transactions are being promoted more aggressively than ever, meaning that this does not look like an isolated policy but rather part of a coordinated and relentless push toward a cashless society, and the uncomfortable truth is that not everyone is ready or even able to keep pace with this shift, with many pensioners lacking smartphones, distrusting apps, or refusing to risk putting their entire financial lives into systems they neither fully understand nor feel secure in. And for those people, the loss of access to cash is not just inconvenient but devastating, stripping away stability and autonomy. The question then becomes, once withdrawal limits are introduced, where does it stop? Because today the limit might be set at £300 per week, tomorrow perhaps lower, and in time the very right to access your own money in physical form could disappear altogether, a prospect that is alarming to citizens and deeply controversial, which is why this debate feels so urgent, and why separating fact from rumor, exposing what is being discussed behind closed doors, and understanding the implications for personal freedom and financial independence is so important right now. The banks may not have openly declared that they are banning cash withdrawals for those over 65, but the pattern is clear for anyone paying attention. As branches continue to close year after year, ATMs continue to be removed, and digital payments are being pushed harder and harder as the future, which paints a picture that older people find deeply worrying, because they can already see where this road is leading, and though banks present polished statements about safety, fraud prevention, and customer protection, the uncomfortable truth is that limits on cash do not stop scams, because criminals always adapt, and in fact such limits may even make pensioners more exposed by forcing them into digital systems where they are less confident and more at risk, which means that what is being presented as safety is in practice a restriction, and a damaging one at that. For pensioners, cash is far more than just a method of payment. It is a form of security, the comfort of knowing exactly what you have in your pocket, the ability to manage every pound and penny without needing to look at a screen, the trust that when you go to the market on a Saturday morning you can buy your bread and vegetables without worrying about technology, and the reassurance that your money cannot simply vanish because of a glitch or outage, so when that is taken away it feels like the tearing up of a rule book that has guided them for decades, and beyond the practical consequences the emotional and mental toll of being told they cannot access their own savings in the way they always have would be immense, creating confusion, distress, and resentment. Not long ago it was perfectly ordinary to walk into a branch and withdraw £500 in cash without anyone questioning it, but today quiet restrictions are already creeping in, with some banks asking for forms, probing customers about their reasons, or even delaying payments, and the idea that age itself could soon become a trigger for such suspicion raises serious concerns about discrimination, because why should someone over 65 who has worked, saved, and contributed their whole life be treated differently from someone younger when both are simply trying to use their own money? And this is why pensioners across the United Kingdom are beginning to push back, making it clear that this is not only about banking but about freedom, independence, and the right to choose how to manage their personal finances. And while some may prefer digital methods and others may embrace apps, many feel safer with cash, and nobody should take that choice away from them. The anger being expressed is not only about potential limits themselves but about the principle that people are being nudged, coerced, or pushed into a digital world they neither asked for nor agreed to, a system that does not suit everyone and leaves many feeling excluded, unsafe, and unwelcome, and this sense of coercion is fueling frustration, while at the same time it is drawing families into the issue because when older parents or grandparents cannot access cash, the responsibility often falls on children or relatives to manage accounts online or step in to handle payments, creating burdens that ripple outward and transform what might appear to be a narrow pensioners' problem into a family issue and, ultimately, into a national concern. Meanwhile, the broader picture cannot be ignored, because the UK is moving toward a cashless society faster than almost any other country in Europe, with shops, cafes, and even small businesses already refusing to accept physical money at all, which might feel modern and convenient to some but is leaving many behind, especially in rural areas and villages where internet connections are unreliable, where not all businesses have the infrastructure for digital payments, and where cash remains king. And if restrictions are pushed ahead in such communities, the impact could be devastating, creating a stark divide between those who can adapt to digital and those who cannot, a divide that is already visible and growing wider. And here lies the irony, because every time there is a power cut, every time a banking app fails, or every time a card system glitches, suddenly everyone, regardless of age, remembers the value of cash as the one form of money that does not depend on electricity, servers, or apps, making it the ultimate backup system and a form of national resilience that should be preserved, not eroded, for the good of everyone, not just the elderly. Beyond the practical, cash also carries enormous emotional weight for older people because it symbolizes independence, pride, and self-sufficiency, allowing them to manage their own money without needing to lean on their children or to wrestle with unfamiliar technologies, and removing that independence feels cruel, stripping away dignity and replacing it with dependence, which explains why this story resonates so strongly and cuts so deeply, because beneath the surface this is not merely about pieces of paper but about respect and autonomy. Looking abroad, countries like Sweden provide a clear warning, having gone almost entirely cashless only to find that older citizens were left stranded, excluded from daily life, and unable to pay for essentials, forcing the government to step in and legislate to preserve access to cash in certain circumstances after a powerful backlash, a scenario that should serve as a cautionary tale for the UK, because moving too quickly down this path risks leaving behind an entire generation who simply cannot or will not function in a digital-only system. Naturally, this leads to the question of what can be done, and the answer is that awareness, conversation, and collective pressure matter enormously, because silence allows restrictive policies to creep forward unnoticed, whereas vocal opposition can make institutions rethink, as was seen when branches tried to go card-only and were forced to backtrack after fierce public resistance, proving that pensioners and their supporters are not powerless, and that when voices are united banks must listen, since their survival depends on customer trust. Ultimately, at the heart of this issue is a simple truth. Money is not just a number on a screen or an entry in a database. It represents years of work, sacrifice, and planning, and no institution should have the authority to dictate how you access it. And when you look at the bigger picture, the closure of branches, the disappearance of ATMs, the rise of card-only policies, and now the talk of withdrawal limits, it paints a clear image of cash being gradually edged out. And unless resistance is strong, the choice could vanish before anyone realizes how much has been lost. And while digital banking undeniably brings benefits for many in terms of convenience and speed, the real issue is not whether digital methods are good or bad but whether people have the freedom to choose, because removing choice is what creates resentment and erodes trust, which is why the future of cash in Britain hangs in the balance, carrying enormous implications not just for pensioners but for families and communities across the country. And for those over 65, this is not simply about policy but about dignity, freedom, security, and the right to remain in control of their own lives, a right that must be defended now, because once it is gone, it may never return.